Have you ever heard of the tribe of Naphtali? Maybe this name isn't as famous as Judah or Benjamin, but the story behind it is full of mystery and meaning. It all began in a complicated household, marked by rivalry, jealousy, and family disputes. Jacob, patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel, had his second son with Bilhah, servant of his wife Rachel, in the midst of a complex web of emotions and expectations. But who really was Naphtali? And why did a tribe that came from such difficult circumstances end up playing such a special role in God's divine plan? Get ready to discover how, out of domestic tensions, God charted an unexpected path, bringing honor and light where there had once been only doubt and shadows. Watch this video until the end and discover the surprising story of the tribe of Naphtali in the Bible. It all begins in a household where one man's love was divided between two women who, while being sisters, also became rivals. Jacob deeply loved Rachel, the younger one, the one who had captured his heart from the very first glance. But it was with Leah, the older sister, that he first got married, deceived by his father-in-law Laban. What began in confusion and deceit gave rise to a family full of conflicting feelings. Leah, though less loved, was the first to give children to Jacob. And in a culture where motherhood was seen as a symbol of blessing and honor, this made her feel justified. One by one, Leah had children and Rachel, none. Time passed, the children grew, and Rachel's womb remained empty. And that silent pain began to corrode her heart. No comfort was enough. For Rachel, barrenness was like a shadow that followed her every day, even beside the man who loved her. Then, in a desperate move, she made a decision that would change the course of history. She gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob, so that through her, she might have children. This was a cultural practice at the time. The servant could bear children in the name of her mistress. And so, Bilhah lay with Jacob and bore her first son, named Dan. But Rachel still wasn't satisfied. Sometime later, Bilhah conceived again, and that's when Naphtali was born, the second son of the servant. When Rachel took him in her arms, she declared firmly, "I have wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed." The name Naphtali comes precisely from that struggle. It means something like my struggle or my battle. You see, the birth of Naphtali was not surrounded by peace. He was the product of a family dispute, of wounded emotions, of women who, instead of celebrating the blessing of motherhood together, saw one another as rivals. The story of Naphtali begins, therefore, not in lullabies and warm embraces, but in an atmosphere of tension and comparison. But this is where the beauty of the Bible begins to shine, because God does not reject those born in pain. He doesn't cancel his plans just because the origin was troubled. On the contrary, it is precisely in the most difficult contexts that he begins to write stories of purpose. And with Naphtali, it would be no different. Even being the son of a servant, even being born from a relationship marked by jealousy and rivalry, Naphtali would become the father of a tribe that would receive an inheritance among the 12 of Israel. His descendants would have a voice, land, and identity. What began with tears would become part of a chosen people called to walk toward the promised land. This part of Naphtali's story teaches us something profound. God does not write stories only from perfect beginnings. He is a master at turning conflict into blessing. The name Naphtali, though it carries the memory of a struggle, would also become a symbol of victory. The woman who declared him the result of a battle also declared him a trophy. I have prevailed. Naphtali's story begins in a divided home, but moves toward a future in which he and his tribe would become part of God's redemptive plan. This shows us that even in complicated families with painful histories, God can still bring forth inheritance, identity, and future. Time passed. The sons of Jacob grew up, formed families, and multiplied, becoming the patriarchs of the tribes that would later be known as the 12 tribes of Israel. Now Jacob was an old man, living his final days in Egypt, surrounded by sons, grandsons, and the unexpected reunion with Joseph, the son he thought he had lost forever. On his deathbed, with a tired voice but a spirit full of discernment, Jacob called all his sons for something that would mark the destiny of each one of them, a prophetic blessing. This blessing was not a simple goodbye. It carried words that would echo through generations. It was as if Jacob, guided by God, could see beyond the present. He saw what his sons would become as tribes. Each phrase carried destiny, nature, identity. It was a spiritual reading of what each son and his descendants would represent in God's plan for the people of Israel. When it was Naphtali's turn, Jacob did not speak of war, land, or rivalry. He looked at his son and declared, "Naphtali is a doe set free. He utters beautiful words." Genesis chapter 49, verse 21. A poetic, delicate, and at the same time powerful image. There is no denying it was one of the shortest blessings, only one line, but within it there was a depth that few would notice at first glance. First, Jacob compares him to a doe set free. This animal, in the context of Hebrew culture, represented lightness, speed, and graceful movement. It was a free creature running through the hills, almost dancing among rocks and shrubs. By describing Naphtali in this way, Jacob was saying that his descendants would have a free, agile nature, not easily bound by the weight of oppression or by limitations imposed by circumstances. The doe was also a symbol of beauty and sensitivity. In other words, Naphtali would be someone who moves with wisdom, who acts quickly but with balance. Then Jacob adds, "He utters beautiful words." Here lies a mystery. Naphtali is not remembered for great military achievements like Judah, nor for priestly roles like Levi. He is remembered for words. This shows us that the role of the tribe of Naphtali would be to inspire, teach, and encourage. Their voice would indeed carry beauty, but not merely aesthetic beauty. It would be a voice that touches hearts, brings direction, and lifts up the fallen. The tribe would have a rare ability to speak with wisdom and touch with gentleness. It is no wonder that many years later, this tribe would be among those who promptly responded to the call of Deborah, prophetess and judge of Israel. They knew how to hear the voice of God, and they knew how to respond. They were not paralyzed by fear. Within them was a kind of courage that made no noise but left a mark. This reveals that Naftali was not merely a son born from the pain of a dispute. He carried an essence that made him unique among his brothers. The lightness that Jacob saw in Naphtali was a gift. In a world marked by tension, wars, and struggles for power, a tribe with a light spirit, agility, and sweet words would become necessary. They would be like a breath of hope in the middle of the desert. And more than that, the geography of the tribe, which would later be established in the north near Galilee, would reflect this very characteristic. A place of sweet waters, gentle mountains, and open horizons. The territory matched the blessing, light, beautiful, and welcoming. But this blessing also teaches us something for life today. Sometimes, we expect God to see us as strong warriors, dominant leaders, or visible conquerors. But God also honors those who have lightness in their hearts, wisdom in their words, grace in their actions. Not everyone needs to win with swords. Some win with counsel, others with calm yet firm attitudes. The blessing of Naphtali reminds us that there is power in gentleness, there is authority in sensitivity, and there is a special place in the kingdom of God for those who know how to speak with beauty and act with freedom. Jacob did not bless just one man. He cast upon Naphtali an identity that would be passed down from generation to generation, and the most incredible part, God fulfilled every word. The tribe of Naphtali would become known for readiness, swiftness, and courage, but also for gentleness, sensitivity, and responsiveness to the voice of God. It was the beginning of a journey marked not by brute force, but by the lightness of a spirit guided by something greater. After many years of wandering in the desert, intense battles, trials, and miracles, the people of Israel finally began to take possession of the Promised Land. It was a new chapter in the story of God's people. Joshua, the successor of Moses, now led the 12 tribes with wisdom and courage. Conquest after conquest, the lands were being divided according to divine direction. Each tribe would have its own portion of land, a territory that was not just a geographical area, but a sacred inheritance. It was the fulfillment of the promise made by God to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And when it was time for the tribe of Naphtali, something special happened. Their inheritance was a true hidden treasure in the north, a place where the eyes wandered among the hills and where the waters flowed sweetly, giving life to the land. The Bible, in Joshua chapter 19, records that the region of Naphtali included cities such as Kadesh, Hazah, Edrei, En-Hazor, Ir-Hamath, Cana, and many others, in total 19 cities and their surrounding villages. But this was more than just a list of names. Each city carried stories that were yet to be written. Kadesh, for example, would later become a city of refuge, a place of shelter and justice for those who had committed involuntary manslaughter. Hazor, in turn, was an ancient Canaanite city, highly influential and strategic, which was conquered by the Israelites and played a key role in future wars. The land of Naphtali was marked by natural beauty. It was a place where the fields were fertile, ideal for farming and raising livestock. The sweet and abundant waters, coming from springs, lakes, and streams, brought freshness and abundance. There were hills, plains, and the Lake of Gennesaret, also known as the Sea of Galilee, in the southern part of its territory, which formed part of the landscape. It was as if God were giving the tribe of Naphtali a piece of paradise, shaped with a balance between nature, strategic position, and spiritual potential. The geographical position was also decisive. Naphtali was located in the far north of Israel, bordering foreign lands. This placed the tribe as a kind of sentinel of the kingdom. When enemies came, Syrians, Arameans, or other northern nations, it was through there that they would enter. In other words, Naphtali was not just a beautiful land, it was a land of vigilance, resistance, and military importance. It was a territory that required attention, courage, and readiness. But there was also another aspect. This land would become the setting for future miracles. Centuries later, when everyone thought the glorious days were long gone, something surprising would happen there. The Messiah himself, Jesus Christ, would choose to begin his ministry precisely in the lands of Naphtali and Zebulun, fulfilling an ancient prophecy of Isaiah. The north, once known as a despised region, would be illuminated with the greatest light that ever set foot on the earth. The land of Naphtali was therefore more than just a physical inheritance. It was a prophetic inheritance, a space set apart for God's future action. What God gave to the tribe was not accidental. It was part of a greater plan, a divine script that brought together nature, strategy, and redemption. And this teaches us a precious lesson. The inheritance God gives us does not always appear grand in human eyes at first, but over time revelations occur, and what once seemed simple becomes the stage for extraordinary things. Naphtali, with the lightness of a deer and beautiful words, received a land that matched his spirit. Beautiful, flowing, alive. And this land would later hear the very words of Christ, see his footsteps and witness his miracles, a place where heaven touched the earth. It is as if God had saved the best for the one who was born in the midst of dispute, but grew up carrying grace. The inheritance of Naphtali was also a sign of God's faithfulness, who not only delivers promises but plants in them purposes that bloom at the right time. Already in the days of the judges, times were dark in Israel. The land that had once been divided among the 12 tribes now groaned under the weight of oppression. The people had turned away from the Lord, and as a consequence, their enemies prevailed. A cruel king ruled the northern region, Jabin, king of Canaan, reigning from the powerful city of Hazor. His military commander, Sisera, led a feared army equipped with 900 iron chariots, war technology that, at that time, seemed invincible. For 20 years, the people of Israel lived crushed under this tyranny. Caravans stopped traveling, the cities fell silent, even the paths between villages became dangerous. It was as if hope had been stripped from the hills. But in the midst of that silence, God raised a voice. And that voice was Deborah, a woman unlikely in human eyes but fully empowered by God. Judge, prophetess, and leader of the people, Deborah sat beneath a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel, and there the people came to hear wisdom and seek guidance. One day, guided by God, Deborah summoned a man named Barak from the tribe of Naphtali. She spoke clearly. "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you to go, gather at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun?" Judges chapter 4, verse 6. The order came from heaven. It was time to respond. It was time to fight. But Barak hesitated. He answered, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go." A request that, at first glance, sounded like insecurity, but Deborah with firmness agreed. Though she said the final honor of the victory would not be his, but would belong to a woman. Even so, the mission had been given, and this is where the tribe of Naphtali stands out. They did not retreat in the face of the threat of iron chariots. They did not ask for time. They did not question Deborah's authority. They stepped forward with readiness, side by side with their brothers from Zebulun. They climbed Mount Tabor with courage, even knowing that down below the enemy armies were heavily equipped and trained to kill. Naftali, who had been blessed as a doe set free, agile and graceful, now revealed itself also as a brave troop of war that knew how to fight when the people cried out for deliverance. What happens next is one of the most astonishing moments in the book of Judges. When Barak descends from the mountain with his 10,000 men, God enters the battle. The Bible says that the Lord confused Sisera and all his army. The iron chariots, once so feared, became stuck in the mud. Scholars believe a storm fell on that day. The wheels that once crushed the Israelites now sank into the wet ground, and the warriors from the tribe of Naphtali were there, advancing with faith, swords in hand, defeating an enemy that had seemed invincible. Naphtali's courage that day marked a new chapter for the people. They were decisive. They were swift. They were steadfast. They showed that the lightness which characterized them could also be transformed into strength when the Spirit of the Lord was leading. After the victory, Deborah sang a song, one of the oldest poems in the Bible. And in that song, the tribe of Naphtali is honored. Zebulun is a people who risked their lives unto death, as did Naphtali, on the heights of the field. Judges chapter 5, verse 18. They were not merely soldiers. They were spiritual heroes who trusted in God more than in their own weapons. This story teaches us something powerful. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience, even in the face of fear. Naphtali could have hidden, could have remained silent, could have said, "This is not our problem." But they stood up. And when God calls, that is what is expected. Not perfection, but readiness. Naphtali was not only a doe set free with beautiful words, it was also an army ready for battle, a tribe willing to place itself between the people and oppression, trusting that God would fight alongside them. They became a symbol of a faith that acts, that runs toward the calling, and that answers with courage when the world says victory is impossible. Time passed, centuries went by, kings rose and fell, prophets were raised up and silenced. The people of Israel endured exiles, returns and oppression, and among so many tribes, so many names and territories, who still remembered Naphtali? That tribe from the north, from the hills and waters, seemed to have been swallowed up by the dust of history. Their days of bravery in the war with Deborah seemed distant. The voice that was once beautiful was now silent. The people who once ran like a deer now walked bent under the yoke of the Roman Empire. There was darkness over the land and over the soul of Israel. For centuries, the tribe of Naphtali lived in its portion in the north of Israel, fulfilling its role among the 12 tribes. But like so many other regions of Israel, over time, the land of Naphtali was forgotten by the elites of Jerusalem, neglected by the powerful, and scorned as the Galilee of the Gentiles because of the great cultural mix and foreign influence. However, God has a unique way of valuing what the world rejects, and it was precisely there in the ancient land of Naphtali that a new glorious chapter of history would be written. Long before this happened, the prophet Isaiah had already declared a powerful prophecy. In Isaiah chapter 9, he proclaimed, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and upon those who dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, a light has shone." Just a few verses earlier, he directly mentions the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali, foretelling something that would come centuries later, the arrival of the Messiah. Time passed, kingdoms rose and fell, and Galilee, where the tribe of Naphtali was located, came to be seen as an ordinary region, far from the religious centers. But it was precisely in this place, so seemingly forgotten, that Jesus chose to begin his ministry. The evangelist Matthew makes this clear in Matthew chapter 4, verses 12 and 16. He directly quotes the prophecy of Isaiah, stating that when Jesus heard about the imprisonment of John the Baptist, he left Nazareth and went to live in Capernaum, a city by the sea in the regions of Zebulun and Naphtali. It was as if heaven was saying to the world, "You may have forgotten this land, but I have not." God, who never abandons what he promises, honored Naphtali in a magnificent way. That territory, which had once been the stage of battles and inheritance, now became the sacred ground where the very Son of God would walk. It was there, in the region of Naphtali, that Jesus chose his first disciples. Simple fishermen, common men of the people, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, all called while carrying out their ordinary routines along the shores of the Sea of Galilee. It is in the land of Naphtali that the Sermon on the Mount is preached, where the paralyzed walk, the blind see, lepers are healed, and the dead are brought back to life. The people who walked in darkness truly saw a great light. The prophecy of Isaiah was not just a poetic figure of speech, it was truth unfolding before the people's eyes. The Messiah did not first appear in the Temple of Jerusalem, nor in the palace of Herod, but in the villages, fields, and mountains of the land of Naphtali. And that says much about the heart of God. He chooses the despised places to reveal his glory. He visits the forgotten to fulfill his promises. Thus, the tribe of Naphtali, which began with a name rooted in struggle, My Battle, and received blessings of lightness and beauty, concludes its journey in the scriptures with a glorious ending. The territory that once held their inheritance now welcomes the Savior of the world. And the people who were once called insignificant now become witnesses of the light. This teaches us something profound. God does not forget those whom the world ignores. What seems small in the eyes of men is often great in the eyes of God. Naphtali, the son of the servant, the fruit of Rachel's sorrow, becomes a symbol of hope and redemption. The tribe's territory, with its waters, hills, and cities, becomes the stage for the greatest miracles in history. The land of Naphtali was not only remembered, it was chosen. That soil, marked by generations, was now walked upon by the feet of the Messiah. Jesus did not merely pass through, he lived there, he taught there, he healed there, he forgave there. And so, the tribe that began in silence ends in light. The light that once shone in the north continues to illuminate the world to this day. That is how God's plan works, perfect in the right time. What began with tears ends in glory. What was born from a battle between sisters becomes the setting of the gospel. And the tribe of Naphtali reminds us that it does not matter how a story begins. What truly matters is how God chooses to end it. Now, write in the comments if you already knew the story of the tribe of Naphtali in the Bible, share this message with others, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. May God bless you.